So tonight tonight we're in the last chapter of Jonah. It's Jonah chapter 4. And often in the Bible and in life, you find people asking God questions. You find people begging God to do something. In the end of this chapter, it's really unique. It's really different. God does the begging. That God begs Jonah to do something, that God begs Jonah. And the way that this chapter ends, the way that this book ends, it ends on a cliffhanger that you don't know what happens. That the end of Jonah, it ends in a question, and God is asking Jonah a question, and that same question that God asked Jonah is that same question he's asking you tonight. So let's go to Jonah chapter 4, and let's go to the first verse. And once again, this is our theme. Jonah, it's not about God causing a fish to swallow a man. It's about God causing a man to swallow his pride. Jonah chapter 4. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. Okay, so why is Jonah angry? That if I was writing the book of Jonah, I would end everything in chapter 3, because chapter 3, you have Jonah, he goes to Nineveh, and it's really a remarkable story, because in chapter 1, his heart is against God, and he wants nothing to do with what God has called him to do. He ends up in the belly of a fish in chapter 2. In chapter 3, he finally goes to Nineveh, and he finally preaches this message of repentance, and the people of Nineveh, they repent, and you would think the story would stop right there. But no, Jonah is angry, and you remember this, that Jonah deals with pride, that pride is Jonah's problem. And in chapter 2, when he's in the belly of the fish, and he prays to God, you think he swallowed his pride. You think everything is good. You think Jonah is going to be okay. Chapter 3, it looks really good. And then chapter 4, all those feelings, all that anger, all that frustration, it comes back to the surface. And Jonah is angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." And the Lord said, "Do you do well to be angry?" That Jonah is super mad, and he says, "God, take my life." And the question that God asks Jonah, he says, "Do you do well to be angry?" Is your anger helping you? Jonah, that anger you're holding on to, how is that helping you in life? And here's the thing about Jonah. How does Jonah get so messed up? Because he's a prophet, right? That he's someone that loves God in one season of his life, and now he's completely messed up. How does that happen? It's because Jonah was holding on to something in his heart that he couldn't let go. That Jonah is a messed up person, and not as only Jonah messed up, I'm messed up, and so are you. That no one in this room is better than Jonah. But what happened? Jonah held on to pride, and pride changed him into someone he was never meant to be. How many of you guys know about Satan? Anyone heard that guy's name before? Satan, the devil? Okay, hopefully. Okay, so who was Satan before he was Satan? All right, Jared. An angel. And what was that angel's name? Okay, if you just say it, just say it. Okay, Lucifer. Okay, so you have Satan. He starts off as this angel, and his name is Lucifer. Okay, so what was Lucifer's sin? What got him in trouble? Anyone know? Okay, Aaliyah? Okay, he wanted to be praised more than God. That's good. Anyone else have? Okay, Liberty? Pride, yes, yeah, that's exactly what the Old Testament says. It says that Lucifer had pride, and pride changed an angel into a demon. Pride changed a prophet who loved God into someone that's begging for death. How is pride changing you as a person? That Jonah's anger, it starts off with anger and it ends with him begging for death. That something that started off small became really big in his life and it really changed him. And maybe for some of you, maybe it's not anger, right? Maybe some of you, you struggle with wanting to be accepted. That maybe you really want to be accepted and that's not happening right now and that's causing resentfulness to grow in your heart. Or maybe it works like this, that maybe like 2 months ago, you were friends with someone in this room and something really small happened and you couldn't get over it, you couldn't let go, and now you're not friends with that person anymore. That whatever you're holding on to tonight, God is saying this, is it worth it? Is what you're holding on to, is that really helping you in life? And what God would beg you, God would say, let it go. That's what he's basically saying to Jonah. He's saying to Jonah, Jonah, let go of your anger. Why? Because God is gracious, God is merciful, God is slow to anger. That God is literally saying, Jonah, come to me. Jonah, bring your issue to me. And that's the same thing God is saying to some of you tonight. What are you holding on to in your life right now that's really messing you up? What's really going on in your heart right now? And here's the scary thing about sin, right? Jonah looked so good after chapter 2 that he prays to God and he's loving God, and yet it all comes back. That as Christians, that here's the thing, you can be a really good Christian, you can really love God, and you can have really deep struggles. That there are some of you in this room right now that you really love God, you really love Jesus, and yet you have really tough issues you're dealing with. So the question becomes this: how do we give things over to God? I want you to be thinking about that for the rest of this night. How do you give your issue over to Jesus? Like, what would you have to do to give whatever you're struggling with? It's like this: whether it's pride, anger, maybe it's self-esteem issues, and this is you right now. And you're just holding on to this, and you're holding on to it really tight, and it's really hurting you, and God is saying, give it to me. And maybe you're like this: I don't know how. I don't know how to give something over to you, Jesus. I want to, but I don't know how to let go. For the remainder of this night, I want you to be thinking about that. How do you give things over to Jesus? See, what God tells Jonah is what God's telling you, and what choice will you make? So let's go on. So you have verses 5 through 8. Jonah, he goes out of the city, and he makes this little booth for himself to sit at, and he's looking at the city, and he wants to know, is God going to destroy Nineveh? Is God going to level the city? And he's like sitting in the sun, and the sun's beating on him, and God like puts this plant over his head, right? Because God cares about Jonah. He makes this plant come up, and this plant is covering Jonah to give him a shade. So what happens in verse 8? When the sun arose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down the head of Jonah so that he was faint. And he asked that he might die, and said, it is better for me to die than to live. Okay, so why did the plant die? Does anyone know what happened to the plant? Well, what, Ben? A worm ate it. So first, let's look at two things here. That is the plant most likely that was covering Jonah is a castor oil plant, something like that. And that was native of the land back then. So a plant like this, God probably made to protect Jonah, to give him shelter. And Jonah, he really loves that plant, right? Because that plant provides comfort for him. So I want you to get that right there, that Jonah really loves that plant. Why? Because it provides comfort for him. And that's the something oil plant. Forgot the first name, starts with a C, look it up later. Okay? Does anyone know what that is? That's a helgamite. That probably was not the bug that attacked Jonah. The reason why I'm showing you a picture of a helgamite is because, actually, that's pretty cool. Okay, I'm sorry. I got kind of dizzy. Anyone else get dizzy from that? Okay, one more time. Okay, I went too far. Okay, I'm back. So when I saw that it said a worm attacked that plant, it made me think of, okay, not that, but that helgamite. And here's the story. Okay, someone did something really terrible to me like 2 weeks ago. We're in the church office, right? Actually, there's this guy in the church. He's trying to help me get, some of you know I struggle with nature. And okay, it's not that funny. Back off. Okay, don't call it your problems. But anyway, so, it's not so much nature that I deal with, it's the creatures that live in nature. And this guy in the church, like a really nice dude, he said, Daryl, I want to help you. Oh, that was cool. I want to help you get over your fear of nature. So he took a helgamite, he put it in a Ziploc bag, he put it on my desk when I wasn't there. But he told me he was going to do it, so I was expecting it. I show up one day in the office, and there's a helgamite in a Ziploc bag. Cool, I saw it coming, I picked it up, and we had staff meeting. And I went to staff meeting, I was showing off this helgamite in a Ziploc bag, and then something terrible happened. The helgamite did this. It moved its arm. I thought it was dead. When its arm moved and I realized it was alive, I threw it at Pastor Tim.
Don't forget the part where you screamed like a girl.
Okay, well, pause. Some people interpreted my war cry as a scream. But anyways, when it waved its arm, in my mind, this is what happened. The helgamite was saying, I don't know why I'm here, but I think it's because of you. And if I get out of this bag, I'm going to mess you up. And that really has nothing to do with my lesson, but when I saw worm and plant, I thought of the helgamite. So we do not put helgamites on Pastor Daryl's desk. That's a bad thing to do. Anyways, back to Jonah chapter 4, last verses. What happens? The plant dies because God sent a worm. Probably it was a helgamite because they're terrible creatures, but God sent a worm to eat the plant, and the plant dies. And Jonah is upset over this plant dying. So what does God say? But God said to Jonah, do you do well to be angry for the plant? Remember, the first time God asked that question to Jonah, do you do well to be angry? When God is begging Jonah, hey, Jonah, give me your issue. Jonah has nothing to say to God. That Jonah completely ignores God's question, and he goes off and he makes his booth and he's looking to see if the city's gonna be destroyed. The second time God asks him, do you do well to be angry? What does Jonah say? He says, yes. Yes, I do well to be angry, angry enough to die. That Jonah talks back to God and he lets God have it. That Jonah tells God exactly what's on his mind. He says, do you think I'm angry? Do you think I'm angry enough? Yes, I am so angry, I can die right now. But once again, God is gracious. God is merciful. God is long-suffering. And he has eternal love for those who belong to him. So what does he say to Jonah? And the Lord said, you pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow. which came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should not I pity Nineveh, that great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle? That God says to Jonah, Jonah, you're angry over a plant that did nothing for you. You want me to show compassion to a plant. What about all those people? What about life? That Jonah's issue was this. Jonah valued his own comfort more than anything else. What about you? Do you value being comfortable more than what God has called you to do? That this past Sunday, I lost my phone, and I was searching all over for my phone. And then it dawned on me, when I found my phone, I was incredibly happy. And then God convicted me of something. When was the last time I was concerned for someone that was lost? I'm concerned over a lost phone. Am I concerned over lost people? That, guys, this can be your greatest tool. That because of your phones, you are connected to hundreds of people. Some of you have Instagram, some of you have Twitter, some of you have Snapchat, and use that for fun, right? Like, have fun with it, but maybe occasionally you can use this to reach someone for Jesus. Use the gifts God has given you to love people. That's what Jonah's getting at. I mean, that was God's getting at to Jonah. He's saying, Jonah, as much as you love your own entertainment, as much as you love your own comfort, what about loving people? I said earlier, how do you give your issues over to God? Connect your heart with God's heart. There's this one guy, he said this, our hearts are restless, our hearts are at war until we find our heart resting in you. And first I was going to say this, you find your heart resting in God when you serve him. That's not true. Jonah was serving God, and he wasn't resting at all. And those verses we read earlier, those two guys read for us, you have Jesus, he's with the disciples, they've been together for 3 years. So for 3 years, these guys have been walking with Jesus, and they come to this village, right? And this village full of Samaritans, right? And they're just throwing stuff at Jesus, and they're mocking Jesus. And the two disciples, James and John, which is funny because John is known as the disciple of love. John says this, hey, Jesus, you see these people causing us problems? How about we call down fire from heaven to take them out? These guys walked 3 years with Jesus, and Jesus looks at them, and he says, you don't get it. It's been 3 years, and you still don't understand me. Maybe this is what happens. Maybe there's some of us in this room tonight, you're Christians, you love Jesus, but you completely missed his heart. Maybe that's what happens to us as Christians. It's not that we don't love Jesus, but that we miss his heart. What was God's heart throughout Jonah? God's heart was set on loving people. If you want your heart to rest, if you want to be able to give your issues over to God, it starts with this. Having your heart match up with his heart. The better you understand God, the better you'll understand how you fit into God's plan. And practically, it looks like this. Maybe some of you, once again, your iPods, your phones, playing worship music, all the music you play throughout the day. Maybe some of you should play worship music to help you connect with God. Others of you, it's this. is when you're having your quiet time or your devotional and you're really going through this book, when God shows something in your heart that's not right, don't push it aside, but agree with God on that issue. Because what happens in the end of this chapter? Does Jonah respond? No. We have no idea what Jonah said to God. My question for you tonight is this. When God shows you pride in your heart, when he shows you very real issues you're dealing with, are you going to be like Jonah? Are you going to argue with God? Are you going to agree with God and allow your heart to rest in his? So as I'm praying, I'm going to ask the band to come back up. Dear Jesus, we want to thank you for your word tonight. And dear Jesus, help me first and help us all in this room when we walk with you, but we miss who you are. Help us see the blind spots in our lives. Help us not to think that we're better than Jonah, because what happens to Jonah can so easily happen to any one of us. Don't allow us to have pride. I pray that for people in this room tonight, that whatever issues they're holding on to, I pray that when you expose those issues to them, that they would come to you, that they would agree with you, that they wouldn't argue with you, but that they would trust you, and that they would do the opportunities you've given them. That, Jesus, you've given us opportunities to serve, whether it's through a hospital ministry, whether it's through Urban Hope, whether it's going to Haiti. I pray that we would take those opportunities, and when we're taking those opportunities to serve, we would realize we're doing this because you love people. I pray that we wouldn't stay in our comfort zone. I pray that we just wouldn't do what's easy, but we would follow you in what you've called us to do, and that brings peace to us. We give this prayer in your name. Amen.